Hi, it's Linda from the HCP, and it's that time of year again to start seeds indoors. What I'm going to show you today is basically the 10 simplest steps of starting seeds indoors. Firstly, what I always do is I make sure I keep a record book of what I've started each year. What that includes is writing down the date that I seeded the plant out, the variety name of the plant, which is always on the packet, and the estimated weeks to germination or days, whatever it says. Here it's 10 to 15 days. So keep records so that you can refer to them next year and you can figure out if you started something either too early or too late. The second thing is, mostly you'll always have extra seeds left over. Make sure you store them somewhere cool. What I do is I just put them in a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator, and they're great for the following year. And most of them will last 3 to 4 years. Now, the next thing to choose is the container that you're going to start things in. Here at the greenhouse, I usually use these flats. The most important thing is to make sure your container has drainage holes. I use a sterile mixture. This is a professional seeding mix, something like Pro Mix or Sunshine Mix. Just fill it up. Make sure you fill it level. So you're going to fill your container. This mixture here, I wouldn't use outdoor potting mix or soil in your garden because it's just too heavy. It'll be hard for the seeds to germinate properly and it just stays too wet. So usually what I do is I just tamp that down. I water it in so that it's nice and moist when the seed contacts it. And then in a tray this size, I can easily seed 3 or 4 different things. I usually just put in a little separation barrier so I know which variety starts at the next section. So today we're going to do some seeding of something that I really like. It's called climbing spinach. It's an edible spinach, but the best part of it is it climbs 7 to 8 feet high. So you can train it up on a fence or on a trellis or chicken wire, and it just grows upright, and then you just keep picking it. The more you pick it, the more it grows. On this packet it says start indoors 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. So here on the West Coast, most people do their gardening, well, something like this can take cool weather, so this could go outside in April, but certainly by the long weekend in May will be the time to get started. So these actually are nice, fairly large seeds, but whoops, if you do have something small and they're hard to see, what I usually do with a really tiny seed is I mix it with sand, and that makes it easier to broadcast on the soil. So something like this, like I say, you can basically just drop them in individually because they're so nice and large. So once you fill that whole area with seed, then with this being a larger seed, you're just going to cover it up lightly with soil. So you do that, then you take your mix, you just cover it up. Again, you'd water that in so that the seed contacts the soil. And most importantly, make sure you put a label in so that you know exactly what that is. So I would write out the label, climbing spinach, and I'd put the date on it. And I'd also say that it says it's going to germinate in 10 to 15 days. So I would just put that into my flat, and then I'd go on. Once that was all seeded, I'd go on to my next section and seed something different. Now, once you get that done, ideally here at the gardens, we have a propagating table. So we have bottom heat, which helps things germinate a lot faster. As a general rule, seeds need heat to germinate, and then they need cooler conditions when they're actually growing and starting to put on their new leaves. So I would put that over into the heating system and just leave it be. If it was something where I didn't want it to get too wet, something that would take longer to germinate, some seeds take 3 to 4 weeks to germinate, I would use this lovely little dome. After I watered it, I would just cover that up, put it into the propagator, and then that way I can check to make sure that it doesn't get too wet. Once something starts to germinate, you'll see it popping up through. Make sure you remove the dome, otherwise it's just going to cook underneath there. Another problem is that cold temperatures. Most people don't have greenhouse conditions, so when you did this seeding at home, you could put this in a warm room, and once they've come up, make sure they go into a bright window. They need to have lots of light to encourage nice, strong, healthy, sturdy seedlings. If you did pot these, and I'll show you as an example, these are tragedies, which we started about a week, well actually it's 2 weeks now, 2 weeks ago. They do have their true leaves now, so they would be ready to transplant. All I would do is I would take something like this. I try not to disturb the root system too much. I would just pop it up. I'd pull it up by the leaves, and look at that beautiful, nice little root system. And that could go directly into an individual pot. So once you've done that, and you've potted it up, put that in a bright window, but make sure you rotate it, because it's going to get tall and reach for the light. So every day, or every second day, come along and just rotate your seedlings. And that way you'll have nice, strong, healthy plants. The fertilizing part really isn't necessary until you do have plants actively growing, and then I start giving them a liquid feed. Any type of water-soluble fertilizer would do. I usually use 20-20-20 here in the greenhouse. The last most important step is, before you transplant anything out into the garden, make sure you climatize it. Harden it off, which means you have to put the pots out in the daytime to get used to the cool temperatures, bring them in at night. Do that for 3 or 4 days, and after that you're ready to plant them in the garden. Again, remember, the best part about growing from seed is it's cheaper. You can get a lot of seeds for $1.49, and you can choose what you want to grow, and you know exactly what's gone into the growing session. So again, enjoy some new varieties this year and have fun in the garden.